And how often would you say you've seen it happen?
Like weekly.
People who work with children say we're only now waking up to just how much worse.
We find sexual bullying has almost become a way of asserting your power over others, and for that reason it is disturbing.
My daughter was assaulted by a group of boys on the school premises, and it was a serious sexual assault.
We know what we think bullying is, don't we? It's verbal and it can become physical. Tonight we'll show how it's getting sexual, how what starts as name-calling can go into areas that used to be out of bounds. Latest government figures show there were 3,500 exclusions from our schools in 1 year for sexual misconduct. That's 19 per school day. As parents, we think our children are safe when we drop them at the school gates. But are they? Greater Manchester, a typical school scene at lunchtime. Yet some pupils in this playground are discussing something serious: sexual bullying. Although there's no major problem here, the staff want to raise awareness among pupils with the aim of preventing any incidents.
Have you ever been inappropriately or unwantedly touched up?
No, but my friends could have done it by accident, but no, not honestly.
Alright.
Have you ever been touched where you didn't want to be touched?
No.
Have you ever seen it happen to anybody else?
Yeah.
And how often would you say you've seen it happen?
Like weekly.
These teenagers at Mossley Hollins School are training as peer mentors, finding out what their fellow pupils have experienced.
Have you ever been inappropriately and unwantedly touched up?
No, not really, no.
No. Okay. Have you seen this happen in class, out of class? Or
Out of class.
Out of class. How many times?
About 3-4.
About 3-4 times.
I think it does go on, but I think it's relatively small, especially here, because I went round, I think we asked about 10 people and only one said they'd actually been a victim of sexual bullying themselves, though about half of them must have witnessed it happening.
Around the country, sexual bullying and even sex attacks are being carried out on children by fellow pupils. You might be tempted to dismiss this as scaremongering, but the experts say otherwise.
I think it's really difficult for people generally to think about sexually harmful behaviour happening by young people towards young people in schools. But it is an issue, it is happening, and we need to acknowledge it and we need to respond to it.
Many cases go unreported or get written off as children experimenting. But how many involve kids who will continue to cause problems as they get older?
When you look at the backgrounds of some adult sex offenders, you do see inappropriate sexual behaviour when they are younger, as well as other indicators. That doesn't mean that every child who, acts out sexually is going to become a sex offender, but we ignore it at our peril.
Sex attacks are at the extreme end of the scale. Many pupils are experiencing something less dramatic, a kind of bullying which trades on sexual actions and words.
The range of sexual bullying and bullying of that type is very, very widespread. I would say it's endemic. I think most schools will have some forms of it going on.
In London, a girl of 15 was lured into an empty classroom as the day began. There, a group of boy pupils forced her to perform a sex act on one of them. Too upset to speak out herself, she asked her dad to talk to us. We've disguised him to protect her.
We were genuinely very, very shocked and angry at what happened. You see your child safely off to school, and you don't worry about them really until the point when they leave school to come back home. This was something that occurred at a time when I just couldn't possibly have expected her to be a victim of really anything.
The incident had actually occurred in the school building. and the boys concerned had just gone off to their lessons, as if nothing had happened. The girl herself was immediately badly affected by the incident and took some time in the toilets to recover from it. Eventually, she disclosed that something had happened, and she was then referred to the child protection officer in the school.
So when this sex act, this assault took place, was the girl physically forced or threatened or what?
She was physically forced to take part.
It must have appalled you.
Yes, absolutely.
And when you heard the details, you thought it was a matter for the police?
Absolutely, yes.
While the girl was still recovering at home, her parents asked their local council for help with tuition.
I phoned up the local authority and said, could they arrange home tutoring? And the person I spoke to said, well, I'm very sorry, we only provide home tutoring for children who've been excluded from schools, such as the boys who've assaulted your daughter. We don't provide it for their victims.
Help for the perpetrator, but not for the victim? The boys later pleaded guilty to sexual assault and were given custodial sentences. Their victim changed schools, but the fear remains.
If she goes into town and she sees a lot of young people there, or if she's on the train, if she sees anyone from the previous school, she becomes very fearful and very distressed.
Well, in this case, the girl felt able to confide in a teacher, but how many pupils are suffering these sex attacks in silence? Here's how we try to get a closer look at what's going on. We worked with a charity, Young Voice, on this questionnaire to find out more about young people's experiences. 28 children said they had been forced to do something sexual they did not want to do. One girl in the Northwest said she was forced to perform a sex act on a fellow pupil, while another told us she had been raped. For the NSPCC, these kinds of experiences are not unusual.
We've had examples, for instance, of a 16-year-old boy who raped a much younger boy in a secluded setting in school. We've had a 10-year-old who was forcing other children to perform sex acts on him and performing sex acts on them. And we've had much younger children who've been inappropriately touching each other.
Just as a little warm-up, we're going to start off with The Sun Shines On. Okay.
These children from schools around London are taking part in a workshop organised by a charity to raise awareness of sexual bullying.
Okay, the sun shines on anybody who has called somebody gay.
The person standing in the middle describes a situation, and the kids swap chairs if it's something they have been involved in.
The sun shines on anyone who has commented on someone's sexuality.
I was surprised by their honesty and was soon pressed to have a go myself. I think I've got the hang of this now. The sun shines on anyone who's witnessed anybody touching somebody else in a way they shouldn't. That's amazing. That's everybody. The sun shines on anyone who thinks there's too much sexual bullying in their school. Painful to watch. Anyway, thanks. I hope I got that right. That was an eye-opener, so I wanted to talk to the kids individually. They started telling me boys often bullied the girls in a sexual way.
Be grabbing, touching, be verbal a lot of the time. She did this, she did that, or will you do this, will you do that? So.
And you know people who had that going on?
Yeah, like a lot, like in my circle of friends, it happened quite a bit.
Were they upset by it?
For the most part, yeah, but like after a while, I know it sounds really weird, but you just learn to deal with it.
I've seen people being bullied sexually. It's all around you. It's around in your school, if you're in clubs, outside of school, if you always out with your friends after school, at weekends, it's around you.
The touching girls in inappropriate places, like where they don't want to be touched, where they shouldn't be touched, especially in the public place, like school.
But if a boy touches a girl somewhere very private, don't the teachers do anything about that?
Teachers ain't aware. They're like oblivious to everything.
Whether teachers are oblivious or not, experts believe that if schools suspect even minor incidents, they must act.
What tends to happen is if you do not stop a child who is calling other people sexual names, who is pulling down somebody's pants in the toilets, they begin to think that this is an okay way to behave. Nobody says anything, it's just kids. And this starts to become something that they feel is appropriate, and they'll go on to do the next thing, and then the next thing.
What starts as messing around can all too easily escalate into something more serious. For one 13-year-old girl from the southeast, lewd comments came first, then got completely out of control. She agreed to tell us her story, but again, we've hidden her identity to protect her.
I was lining up for English one lesson, and then I felt something behind me, and I felt something between my legs, and I turned around to whack someone, and it was him with his fingers between my legs. When I went to hit him, he just backed down, saying, "Ooh, feisty," and he just walked off laughing back with his friends. It was going on a few months before I told my mum and dad about it. It was like a gradual thing. He was stroking my leg during assemblies and lessons, and then he started to grab my chest, and then he got me between the legs.
Her mother called the school and was told the boy would be spoken to and a letter sent to his parents. But that was nowhere near tough enough for Mum.
The school left me feeling quite in despair on many days. I was a mixture of horrified with the general reaction or lack of action, and feeling powerless to stop or to intervene or to do anything.
The boy stayed in the same class as his victim. Again, the mother protested.
It was inconceivable that somebody could be sexually assaulted and expected to go to school with them and be next to them or near them in a classroom.
The girl and her family reported the allegation to the police. Only then was the boy moved to a different class. But her ordeal's not over. Her friends have turned against her.
One of them said, "I'd be the most hated girl in school. Why should I be doing this? He does it to everyone." Or his friends, they think of it as funny.
Back at Mossley Hollins School in Greater Manchester, the pupils are openly discussing what is acceptable and what is not.
Calling somebody a slag. Where does that fit in the never sexual bullying, sometimes or always? Move to where you think that is.
This group of teenagers are asked to vote with their feet. Faced with scenarios, they stand under the sign they agree with.
One person calling another person a slag. Somebody from the Sometimes group.
Well, it depends if the girl is actually going to take offence from being called slag.
If it's somebody that you don't necessarily know and they're saying it in a mean way, then I'd view it as sexual bullying.
They could be telling the truth. Like, they could be a slag, but they could be saying it in a jokingly way as well. Like if they're really good friends and they know it's just a joke.
We know that there are some incidents, not serious ones. It might be just a little bit of name calling, or perhaps somebody touching somebody in an inappropriate place without realising that it's sexual bullying. And that's the whole point, really, that we want people to realise, we want the students to realise exactly what sexual bullying is. Calling somebody gay, but in the way that gay is used by teenagers these days, i.e. to mean, you know, a sort of geek. You think that's never sexual bullying?
Because I don't think it's the same definition as homosexual.
I'm a father of 2 young children myself, and of course you constantly wonder what kind of world they're going into when they go out the front door. These days I guess you expect teenagers to be pretty streetwise, but below that, at 10 or even 9 years old, do you wonder if there may be pupils at your child's primary school who are so clued up at 6 or 5 years old that they're already looking for sexual contact with other kids? Latest government figures reveal there were 280 exclusions for sexual misconduct among primary school children. 20 of them were 5-year-olds. One family from the West Country was shattered by what happened to their 5-year-old at her infant school.
She'd been to the toilets and a boy had approached her and asked her to come into this room. And he locked the door. He wanted to touch her, so she let him do things to her because she wanted to get out. She was scared.
The family say the school asked them not to go to the police. In the end, they decided they had to report it. However, the police couldn't act because of the boy's age. Yet again, the girl's mother felt let down by the system.
We wanted answers. We just wanted to know how this was allowed to happen to our child. But no one could give us these answers. No one wanted to give them. We just got brushed aside.
Unsurprisingly, they moved their daughter to another school.
She had nightmares, but she'd wake completely inconsolable. It was devastated our family. Certain bits might disappear, but it's still there that we let her down. We sent her to this school.
The NSPCC counsels victims and perpetrators as young as 4 from around the country.
When a child is that young and doing sexually explicit things such as that, we immediately must ask ourselves, where did this child get that from? What are their needs? Have they been abused? And therefore tailor our response to that child in that way.
We were told it was important that the more minor sexual bullying be nipped in the bud.
A lot of what happens in the schools isn't of high level, high profile seriousness, but it's the low level continuous drip and attrition of small scale incidents, repeated incidents, and that create a culture and a climate within the school where more serious incidents can take place.
Sexual bullying has become much more prevalent, certainly over the past 4 or 5 years. On the Kidscape helpline, we used to get, maybe 1 or 2 calls a year about sexual bullying. Now we're getting 2 or 3 a week. And if that is the case, it's probably the tip of the iceberg.
Part of this may reflect the influence of gang culture. While making this program, we've been told of boys carrying out sexual attacks for gang membership and girls swapping sexual favors for protection.
I've actually witnessed quite serious occasions where young people have been involved in sexual activity when they should have been in classrooms. There is an element of young people that run in certain circles in gangs that will coerce younger members to perform sexual acts.
The head teacher at the London school where there was a serious attack says girls can easily get caught up in gang culture.
Sometimes they're asked to perform sex acts as initiation rites for boys who are about to be initiated into the gang. And sometimes they do this willingly, and sometimes I'm very clear that they do it unwillingly. I'm not talking about hundreds and hundreds of occasions, but certainly I can think in the last year that there are 2 or 3 that have been reported by girls in this school alone.
2 or 3 reported incidents in that one school, and that's 1 out of more than 8,500 secondary schools in the UK. Now, it could be dismissed as an inner city problem among kids who are more streetwise than most, but experts say that sexual bullying can happen in any kind of school.
This problem is in all schools. We do find it in inner city schools, but we also find it in fee-paying schools, which are quite well known. We find it in youth clubs. We find sexual bullying has almost become a way of asserting your power over others. And for that reason, it is disturbing.
I was delighted when we had the example of sexual bullying, of invading somebody's personal space.
Back at our Greater Manchester school, the teenagers in the anti-sexual bullying workshop are exploring the idea of boundaries.
Are we ready, everybody? To do with your feelings. How do you feel?
How close they can get to each other without feeling uncomfortable.
Let's do it.
Stop. 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 Stop.
Look at the difference that we've got here.
And I thought school was all about history and maths. Children now live differently from the way that we all did when we were younger, and in many ways they may have better lives. But as parents, we can feel we're spending a lot of time just trying to fend off the world and stop our kids growing up too quickly. If sexual knowledge is coming to them much earlier, where is it coming from? Sexual images as hardcore as can be imagined can be pulled down to a mobile and forwarded round a class in a second. Explicit language is used freely on social networking sites used by children. Around 25,000 users on Bebo have the word slut on their profile page. TV programmes scheduled for after the watershed can be downloaded at any time and watched on demand by kids in their bedrooms.
For 4 months, they're giving you unrestricted access to their lives.
Just picked her up for the night. I'm going to shag her tonight, mate. That's what I'm going to do, eh?
Oh, shagogenic, baby.
Oh, hello. That's a spot right there. Shake your ass. Watch yourself.
The kids at the Beat Bullying workshop know what's sexualising their worlds.
And you know that.
I think the media has a big impact amongst the sexual bullying side of things that happen in schools.
Why is that?
Because everything that, I think in music especially, because most of the songs you hear is like sex this, sex that.
You gotta been all the way over to dance off this. You handle your business.
Magazines have things at the back for positions and things to do with like sex, and text in if you have problems with your boyfriend and stuff like that for 12-year-olds. And if they're 12, you shouldn't really thinking about that.
My little cousin's like, if she's on the internet, like a pop-up will come up, and then she'll be like to her mum, oh, what's this? And then, yeah.
What's something pornographic?
Yeah.
And how old is your cousin?
Like 8. Music
videos, it's like they should censor it. They don't censor things as much as they used to.
As a child,
yeah.
I can call you a child, can't I? You're getting sex thrown at you.
Yeah, more or less every day, 24 hours, 24/7.
As parents, we worry about the language children use. For our kids, those sexual words are just the daily currency of life.
Dwayne, you were saying about sket. What does sket mean?
Somebody sleeps around a lot.
Okay, and do you often hear that?
Yeah.
Where?
School, everywhere. School, where I live. My gran says it sometimes.
Some of this must surely come back to parents, and for that matter, grandparents. It may well be that we look back to our childhoods and we think, well, the boundaries were clear. Our mums and dads were able to say, this is right and that's wrong when we were kids. Nowadays, the boundaries are confused, and some of that has to be the fault of us parents.
I think parents are trying very, very hard to be friends with their children. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we ever make as parents. Children need friends their own age. They only have one set of parents, or maybe 2 or 3 these days. But when you are the adult in the situation, you should act like the adult. You know, what is the point otherwise of parents? You might as well just have kids and let them run around in the field with each other.
So it's time us grown-ups acted our age. But would a group of parents agree? Do you think is society in some way expecting children to behave in a sexual way?
A lot of it is on TV. This idea that there's some pressure that the boys or the girls have got to have sex before X age or something or other.
But what if a broadcaster says, you are complaining about television, we've given you this watershed which is there to protect your children, and you're not enforcing it?
I don't think the watershed exists anymore.
I agree.
I come home from work maybe early at 5:30 and my 16-year-old daughter will be watching Skins.
Yeah, I agree.
But you can record it and it's on demand.
Yeah.
And at the 16-year-old, I didn't really have an issue with her watching it. But my 8-year-old was sitting in the room as well, not particularly watching it, but
Yeah.
I'd say to the 16-year-old, look, that's not suitable. Well, I'm 16, yeah, but Katie's not.
Yeah.
But how can you say there is a watershed when you've got programmes like Emmerdale, Coronation Street,
I agree.
EastEnders,
Murders and
that show
things like
all sorts of sexual scenes and all sorts of sexual things, paedophilia, rape.
Katie and Peter, anyone, kids watching that? Young kids?
I feel like such a bad parent, don't I? Yes, we absolutely love it. We'll sit there and, okay, the language I'm not happy about. But, you know, I mean, my daughter, she's only 10 and she looks up to Katie Price and thinks she's amazing. And you know what? She's not a bad role model. She's an amazing parent. She you know, she's very, very successful in what she does, and that's what my daughter does. You know, she sit there and she goes, Mummy, I'd like to be like her.
What about fashion and the pressure to look sexy for girls particularly? Anybody, Donald?
My 8-year-old, if we were going out, would want to put on some nail varnish. She'd want to put a little bit of lipstick on. And, you know, to say to them, look, you know, why? I mean, it's only a bit of fun, but, you know, this is 8.
Language in the playground.
Or some degree of boasting that goes on in the playground. Certainly they're talking about who they've snogged, for example.
10-year-olds.
10-year-olds.
Yeah. Unfortunately, some of the young people call themselves these names. So you see a girl, oh, this is a picture of me and my sluts, and you think, why? Or, you know, call themselves hoes, and, you know, so that's unfortunate, I think, yeah.
If kids are increasingly sexualised, in brackets, and that there is sexual bullying as a result of that, who is to blame for the situation?
I'm hesitant to apportion blame, to be honest. I think the whole lot, I think parents, the media, I think it's easy for us as parents, sometimes we want to expect the school to do everything or the media to do everything.
Do you feel out of control here?
There's a sense of being a tiny bit out of control because there's so much more to deal with now than we were growing up that it's kind of a scary prospect, really.
That's the view from the parents, but what do you think? Do go online and tell us. And you might be interested to know that the government has promised urgent action to tackle sexual bullying in schools. The Children's Secretary, Ed Balls, is going to bring out some guidance telling teachers how to deal with cases of it that they come across. Next week, jailed for a knife. Why are young people picking up knives? Why do some kill? With rare access to prisons, young offenders convicted of knife crimes speak from their cells.
If you or someone you know has been affected by the issues in tonight's programme and would like details of information and support, call the confidential BBC Action Line on 0800 077 077. Calls are free from a landline. Mobile operators will charge, and lines are open 24 hours a day. Alternatively, visit the Panorama website.